everything you look at gets distorted through the lens of the self, of what your self needs. And what you need is to keep surviving as the self you believe that you are, whatever that is. See? And so you might say, well, Leo, what's the problem with that? I mean, I got to survive, don't I? To a certain extent, you do. But also the problem with that is, what's the cost of looking at the world in a selfish way? The cost of looking at the world in a selfish way is that you don't see it for what it really is. You only see it for how it can serve you. Well, the ultimate cost of that is that if you believe that you are a self and you identify with being some particular self, and you're now engaging in survival your entire life, defending and protecting that self, well, this process can't last forever. It's a finite process. It has to end at some point. And so therefore, now you have committed yourself to fighting against that end your whole life. But also at the back of your mind, you know that end is coming. You sense it's coming and you're afraid of it. And see, now, if you look at the universe as though it has a beginning, or you look at your own life as though it has a beginning, necessarily, because that's a duality, it's going to also have the end of that beginning. You can't have a beginning without an end, and you can't have an end without a beginning. See? So just by thinking that you as an individual being had a beginning, necessarily that means there's going to be an end to it. See? And ordinarily what we assume is just we assume that, well, of course, how else could it be? Yeah, I have a life, I have a beginning, and then I have an end. So this is totally natural and normal, and this is just how reality is. But what if that's not how reality is? What if that is a function of how the mind looks at reality? What if death is not a physical event? What if death is a construction of the mind? What if your birth and your life was a construction of the mind? What then? See, this is a radical, counterintuitive possibility which isn't possible and can't be taken seriously under the materialist paradigm. And that's one of the key limitations of the materialist paradigm. Under the scientific, rationalist, materialist paradigm, as the story goes, there's a physical external reality. We are beings within that reality. We are conscious within that reality, but ultimately our consciousness hinges upon physical factors: atoms, molecules, brains, neurons, biology, genetics, and evolution, and many of these kind of physical stuff. So we ground ourselves in that. And then we believe that, oh, well, death is just a physical process. All physical things die. And you can't do anything about it. And you can't escape it. And so the only solution is to just accept it. But that's assuming that the materialist paradigm is true. What if it's not true? What if there is no external reality? What if there never was? What if that's just concepts and ideas? What if that is a part of how you invented yourself as a self? You see, to really understand how death works, you have to understand how life works and how birth works, because you can't have death without birth. And of course, we take birth for granted as a biological process. It's not a biological process. It's a process of constructing an identity. To be alive at all, you need to construct an identity. Identity is not a scientific fact. Identity is something you construct. And identity is a totally relativistic notion. This is another mistake that materialists make and common sense makes, is we tend to think that, well, I'm a human, I'm this biological organism sitting here, what else could I be? Or like a dog is a dog, and a cat is a cat, and a tree is a tree. And when a tree dies, a tree dies. And when a cat dies, a cat dies. And when a dog dies, a dog dies. And when a human dies, a human dies. No. A tree was never born to begin with. A tree doesn't think of itself as a tree. You think of a tree as a tree. When you say that a tree dies, you are the one who is projecting death onto that tree, and you are the one who's even projecting the identity of a tree being a tree onto the tree. There is no tree. There's colors and shapes and sounds, but there's no such thing as an entity called a tree. Not from the point of view of the tree. This is the key you have to understand here to understand death. See? Identity is the key to death and to life. What you identify as is totally relative and arbitrary.